You're listening to episode 16 of the Fed and Fearless podcast. On today's episode, I have with me Sarah Smith, who's going to be talking all about how to take care of your pelvic health. So stay tuned. Hi, I'm Laura Schoenfeld. I'm a registered dietitian and coach trained in functional medicine with a passion for helping women just like you ditch perfectionism and use food, fitness, and self-care to fuel your bigger God-given purpose. I believe that it's possible to achieve your biggest life-changing goals without the frustration, obsession, or negative self-talk that so many women subject themselves to every day. All you need are the right tools, the right mindset, and the faith to turn your dreams into reality. I'm here to guide you along the way. The truth is that you are so much more than a body, and I'm on a mission to help you change the way you think and act at a core beliefs level so you can transform your physical, mental, and spiritual health from the inside out. Are you ready to become fed and fearless in your pursuit of a healthy, meaningful life? Welcome to the Fed and Fearless podcast. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Fed and Fearless podcast. I'm Laura Schoenfeld. I'm your host as always, and we have another awesome interview today. The person that's here with us is someone who is not only a good friend of mine, but also someone I respect immensely when it comes to all things health and faith as well. So I'm excited to introduce to you Sarah Smith. Sarah is a functional gut and pelvic health educator, and she's on a mission to help women conquer their pelvic health struggles, build strength and skills, and feel confident. She's a strength coach, a level 2 Russian kettlebell certified instructor, original strength pro instructor, certified personal trainer, postnatal fitness specialist, and pelvic floor and gut health advocate. She's a published author with a master's in science. Sarah works online and locally in Raleigh, North Carolina. She loves her boys, her savior, soil, good thing because her life is full of it, her bulldog Bella, her husband Jeremiah, 90s jams, coffee, and not folding laundry. So like I said before, Sarah is one of my good friends. She's here in the Raleigh, North Carolina area with me. So I'm blessed to be able to get to hang out with her on a semi-regular basis. And I know you're really going to enjoy getting to know her as well. So without further ado, here is Coach Sarah Smith. All right, so I'm so excited to have one of my friends and just all around badass coaches, strength coaches, pelvic health experts. I don't know if I'm allowed to say badass, but I guess it's my own podcast, so I can say what I want. But just a friend who inspires me so much. And I'm so excited to have her on the podcast because I can't wait for you all to get to know her if you don't know her already. So Sarah, welcome. So excited to have you here.
Thank you so much. I am really excited about this podcast.
Yeah, well, and I'm just glad that you're on because as I was mentioning before we started the recording, Sarah's got so much to offer, not just about the health stuff that she has expertise in, but also she is really like just I don't want to say impressive because I feel like that's the wrong word, but inspiring woman of faith, and just that element of your expertise and your knowledge and your ability to see things through that lens, I think is super unique and valuable for our audience. So I'm so pumped to have you here. And what I want to do first, just so the women that are listening can get to know you a little bit better and get to understand how you got to where you are today, I would love to hear about how you became, first of all, a pelvic health expert, but just a strength coach in general. Because I know you have a couple of different degrees and different expertises that I would just love to hear your story. What led you to where you are today with the work that you do?
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah. And thank you so much for having me on the show. I have an interesting sort of weird background. My master's degree is in soil and agricultural science. And when I finished that, I thought I was going to work in that field. But it was fitness and strength training and movement during my master's program that I did when I had 2 little kids. I had this thing about like getting pregnant when I was in grad school that kind of kept me healthy and in all ways, right? Like physically healthy, but mentally and emotionally, it was a real important outlet for me. And at the end of when I finally graduated, the jobs are just very demanding. Like agriculture, for the most part, requires you to, if you want to do the kind of work I'm interested in, you have to be in the field all of the time. And I had 2 little kids. So I took a step back from that and thought, what else could I do? I have all boys in my family, so my life is very male dominated. And I found myself craving working with women specifically. So I had been an athletic coach in my early 20s, and I thought, can I go back to coaching? I saw people doing stuff online where they were, online fitness and coaches. And I thought, yeah, why not? So I got into coaching. I got my certified personal trainer, my certification, and I started a website, and I started finding women in my life, friends, family, people in my community. And I was coaching, and I did that for about a year, and I loved it. But then I was diagnosed with some pelvic floor problems. And if anybody here has any experience with that, that can be a real setback, because the pelvic floor is like the foundation of your core. And then a lot of the mainstream messaging around pelvic floor issues is that movement and strength training is off the table because your body can't handle it. So here I was, I had transitioned from one career, finally found something else I loved, was growing that. And then I felt like that was being taken away from me. There wasn't a lot of easy access to good progressive information about pelvic health. So being a scientist, someone with a science background, and liking and enjoying reading peer-reviewed literature and doing research, after a period of mourning and frustration that I went through, and I was like, okay, I don't know how to move forward, I decided to use all of my expertise and throw it at pelvic health. So I found the most progressive people who knew about the pelvic floor, people like Julie Wiebe, Katie Bowman, Susan Clinton, Tracy Scher, a pelvic guru, Anthony Lowe. These are all really cool people doing very progressive work. I studied under them. And then I also just did a lot of my own research, understanding primal reflexes. How did we develop the ability to have a pelvic floor that functioned well in the first place? And I started experimenting in movement. I talked about things online. And so other people would reach out to me, people would come and work with me, and we would experiment. We would try different things. We would get into different breathing practices and strength training practices. And so, yeah, about 2 years of that, studying and practicing and moving and experimenting, I had a really good handle, and I was just getting more and more clients who wanted to be strong. They wanted to do strength training and fitness, but either for whatever reason, they also had this other challenge in their life. And so now a lot of my work is focused on that. And I have a particularly strong heart for women in the Christian community, because I feel like pelvic health and anything that's around discomfort in sex, or even just troubles with elimination, like pooping and things like that, we kind of shy away from. We tend to sanitize conversations, or in that world sometimes, or there's a lot of a shame attached to it. We can't just say, oh yeah, sex is uncomfortable and that's a problem, So I really try to speak out in that world, because I grew up a Christian, and I know I'm familiar with that community. And I think part of the reason I didn't know about my own body as much as I should have was a little bit because of the culture I was raised in. So.
Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing all that. And I think that captures why I'm even starting this podcast in the first place, because I was not raised Christian, but I am a Christian now. And a lot of my friends are Christian, and a lot of them were raised in the church. So I'm the kind, and you know this because we hang out, but I'm the kind of person that will literally talk about anything. And I have no shame about talking about bodily fluids or sex or whatever. Obviously in appropriate context, we're not talking about things that I think would be considered harmful to ourselves or anything like that. But just having those conversations in general and being able to talk openly and honestly in a way that feels, first of all, safe, and that you're protected as far as your private information is concerned, but then also in a way that's actually helpful. Because I think sometimes if anyone ever does talk about something like sex in Christian conversation, a lot of times it's kind of like, oh, haha, sex is for the husband or whatever. And I think that these kind of conversations are really harmful. And also, I think one thing that I like about the secular world and the kind of more women's health focused world, even if they are not coming from a spiritual perspective, is that they do want to talk about this stuff and they do want women to feel good in their bodies and, deal with any sort of reproductive issues or, sexual health issues that come up. And also they're promoting women actually enjoying sex. So I'm hoping that through the work that I'm doing, through the work that you're doing, that we can actually bring the good stuff from that into the Christian women community, because like you said, a lot of women aren't talking about it, and I'll talk about anything. So if y'all are listening and you want to talk about some weird stuff, just DM me on Instagram, let me know, and I'll make sure maybe I'll get Sarah back on here to go even deeper into the weird stuff. But all of that said, we can at least get the basics talked about today. And just when I said basics, I mean real basics for this first question. Can you describe what the pelvic floor is for those who are unfamiliar?
Yeah. So the pelvic floor is basically just a couple layers of muscles at the base of your core. So if you think of your torso and the bottom of your torso, where your legs attach and your hips, like right in between your legs is basically a hammock of muscles. And those muscles have a lot of really important jobs. They stabilize your entire torso. So they help to keep you strong and upright just when you're simply walking around and breathing or reach up to get something high up in a cabinet. They also support your pelvic organs. So if we're talking about women, we're talking about the uterus, the bladder, and the rectum, which are really important organs that we want well protected. So the pelvic floor is really cool. It moves up and down all day long and can provide shock absorption. If you jump or you fall, you're doing like some really cool, like hardcore workout, and or just, walking around. And it's a graded response. Like it's so smart that it knows how to really recruit and support the organs as you need it, and then also relax depending on your movement. And so I love emphasizing that to people, because a lot of the messaging that is coming out about pelvic floor is like strength, strength, strength. And strength is an awesome thing. Like I love strength. But what I want people to understand is that those are the primary jobs of the pelvic floor. It does some other cool things too, but we want it to be fit and capable of its job. And so being strong and tight isn't really the only thing we want to consider, because we need it to relax as well when we're, like I said, to get some shock absorption, to make sure that those important organs are protected. So it's involved, it relaxes so that we can eliminate. Like you can't pee or poop if you don't have the proper relaxation taking place at the proper amount of time, right? And then also it can relax and it will recoil. If you think about like a trampoline, if you're jumping on it, it goes down and stretches and then it bounces you back up, which can be incredibly important if you're doing a heavy squat or you're doing a box jump. So it's a really dynamic structure that's involved in so many important parts of our daily life. And you can see how it can play a huge part in confidence in our bodies, because if those things start to go wrong, and I didn't even mention the sex part, like having a pelvic floor that is adequately strong, but that can also relax, so it's not too tight, can make a huge difference in whether sex is enjoyable or not. So these are pretty important parts of your life, I would say. And when they're off, we can really lose confidence in our bodies.
Mm-hmm. And I think so many women just don't know that that's something to even be paying attention to. So it's almost like things are happening and they may say, oh, it's just because I'm getting older, or, maybe they go to their diet or something. Oh, I'm having trouble with constipation. Let me just look at my diet or fix my diet. And not that that's not helpful potentially, but that's not the whole picture. And I think it's really important to understand what other pieces might need addressing when you're figuring out the puzzle of why you're experiencing symptoms. So speaking of symptoms, what are some of the symptoms that women should be looking out for that might indicate that they have a pelvic floor issue?
Yeah, so I tend to group these symptoms into indications that you have an over-recruited pelvic floor. So a pelvic floor that's working too hard or too much and is holding a lot of tension. And then an under-recruited pelvic floor that's just difficult to access. Maybe it's a little lax, maybe it's a little on the lazy side, maybe neurologically it's hard for you to find the pathways you need to turn it on. And so on the over-recruitment side, a lot of times you will see like tailbone pain, constipation, pelvic spasms, tightness in the hips, low back pain, discomfort during intercourse, difficulty inserting a tampon. And you can have leaking. That's another thing too, leaking both of urine and feces, just because it's not, the pelvic floor isn't relaxing as it needs to, and that messes with the function of your organs. And then on the under recruitment side, same thing, but generally there's sort of like a weak feeling, like you kind of feel like the bottom like could just fall out at any point. Chronic injury, a lot of back pain, a lot of hip pain there. I see a lot of people that have knee and shoulder injuries as well. Leaking again, and that's because you can't recruit the pelvic floor as well as you need to support the rectum or the bladder. And then in extreme cases, if the under recruitment or the over recruitment goes for a while, you can get symptoms of pelvic organ prolapse, where your pelvic organs move out of place. And so you can actually feel pressure. You can feel almost like you're sitting on a ball, or like there's an organ in your vagina, and it's just something feels off.
Well, it's something that I think with that, even the leakage thing, I know that's a kind of common symptom that's discussed. And my experience up until recently was thinking that was more of a weak pelvic floor symptom. So just knowing that those symptoms can be an indicator of weak or tight or over recruited, however you want to describe it, is so important, because I feel like most women, if they think they have a pelvic floor issue, they assume that it's a weakness, and they focus so much on the corrective exercises that are really designed to strengthen potentially or recruit more. And if they're already dealing with over recruited, then it's like, you're not really actually fixing the problem. You might even be making it worse. So can you tell us a little bit about that? Because I know you're the expert and I don't want to steal your thunder.
Yeah, no, absolutely. This is a real problem. And I would say 50% of my clientele are athletic, or, and when I say athletic, like women that like to work out, women that have not had babies, that are dealing with symptoms of over recruitment. People say hypertonic, like high tone pelvic floors, and they are dealing with leaking. And they thought that meant weakness, or they had a medical professional that told them, and they started doing a lot of Kegling. And again, it just goes to this idea of like strong is better. And how we think about strong is we think tense, tight, vaginas. And so we need to do all the reps that we can possibly do and clench and hold everything in, right? As if like the muscles of the body need us to intervene to that degree, which is a whole other thing. But so if the pelvic floor can't relax, and if you're carrying a lot of tension, or maybe it's something as simple as like pressure management, like how you're breathing and how you're aligning your body. If you can't coordinate your breath and your alignment with your movement, then if you create a lot of pressure in your abdomen, then absolutely when you're exercising or when you laugh, cough, any kind of sudden movement if there's too much tension, can cause leaking of urine or feces. So it's weird that you can have similar symptoms with two totally different problems, which is why I think it's really helpful for people to get with a pelvic floor physical therapist and get evaluated, or talk to somebody. Like I'm at the point now where I can talk to people and watch them move, and it's pretty easy to see if over recruitment or under recruitment is an issue. But if you're not assessing, you're guessing. So diagnosing yourself and then prescribing, like you're saying, corrective exercises can actually get you in a worse place. And in the case of over recruitment, can be painful. I mean, there's a lot of inflammation and tightness that can happen if you're Kegling a lot to stop the leaking.
Mm-hmm. And that's really important. We're not going to be diagnosing anyone, obviously, on this podcast, but we're just making sure that people are aware of the possibilities and that they don't just make assumptions, which I feel like because of the way that the internet works these days, and you can just Google stuff. A lot of times when you Google these things, it'll come up and say, oh, you have pelvic floor issues. Here's the solution. And, maybe you get lucky and it's right and it helps. But if it's not the right solution for you, then the best case scenario is it does nothing. And the worst case scenario is it makes it worse. Or like you said, it's uncomfortable or painful.
Yes. There's a lot of shame around this topic because people don't want to discuss anything going wrong with their reproductive areas, right? And I think too, the aging piece plays into it in that like, oh, if there's something wrong, that's because I'm getting older, and unfortunately people use euphemisms or broad categories like pelvic floor dysfunction, which just means the pelvic floor is not really doing its job. And so I think because we have these broad categories and then we have these broad, like panaceas, right? Like Kegels are for pelvic floor dysfunction. People are getting into trouble. And so I really try and create a space where people feel comfortable telling me exactly what's going on so we can decide like, who do you need to get with to get answers that work for your body? Because and sometimes it's not just about the pelvic floor. It's a lot about what's going on upstream or downstream. So.
Mm-hmm. And what are some of the upstream or downstream issues that can show up as pelvic floor issues?
Yeah, so it's interesting, like the nervous system plays a huge role in basically how you breathe, and the state of your nervous system can create inflammation or tension in the body. And so trying to relax the pelvic floor all day long every day or recruit it isn't going to work if the nervous system isn't on board. And simple things like neck and shoulder tension and forward head tilt or shallow breathing with the mouth, some alignment struggles that come with modern life that can sometimes be worsened with exercise, because we don't have great alignment, and then we go into the gym and we load these patterns. They can make it difficult for the body to effectively recruit and relax the pelvic floor. And so we have to look beyond the pelvic floor because it's connected to everything in the body, and there's different changes that are more impactful for different people, but breathing alone and alignment for a lot of my clients, like it makes a big difference.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm pretty sure the nervous system is involved in like every single health problem that exists. Well, but I think the point, not to say that you shouldn't have said that the nervous system is a big factor, but I like to just hammer the point home that the way our brains are operating and the kind of stress we're under and how we're perceiving stress and how we're reacting to stress and even the kind of lifestyle that we're forcing on ourselves in a lot of cases, that is all connected to these symptoms. So it's not just about seeing a pelvic floor therapist and doing your exercise. If your entire life is set up where you're go all the time, you're always like running around like a chicken with your head cut off. And like you said, you're working out really hard and then not being in good body position the rest of the day. So there's so many different factors that are important to be aware of. And this isn't meant to overwhelm people. It's just more to make sure that they're not overemphasizing one treatment modality, because I feel like I see this all the time in my work where people are so hyper-focused on the diet as being the solution. And it's part of the solution, but it's not 100%. And so, if somebody is walking around all day talking negatively to themselves and stressing out about being productive and all that, that is a piece that needs to be addressed. So I'm glad that you mentioned it.
Totally. Yeah. When I go through a stressful period in my life, especially now that it's on my radar, and a lot of my clients deal with this, we can feel like tension in the pelvic floor. And I think for women, especially, like our power really comes from our pelvis, right? Like our uterus is there. A study just recently came out that showed that the uterus impacts brain. Have you seen this? Like brain memory. So some of our memories, when they remove the uterus in animal models, like we lose our ability to remember things, right? So it's really, everything is so connected. And so, yeah, it's not always simple, but the good news is that means you have a lot of options. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of different dials and that you can turn to feel better. And different days, sometimes it's easier to turn different dials, right?
Well, and the good news is a lot of those dials don't just affect the pelvic floor, right? So there's going to be multiple ripple effects of benefits if you're working on breathing and lowering stress and that kind of thing. So I did not hear that story about the uterus affecting our memory. That's a little wild.
I know. It was crazy. It was a rat model that they did. I can't remember if it was in New York Times or Washington Post. It was a pretty big newspaper, but yeah, it was pretty cool.
Well, and I think this is one reason why women learning their bodies and learning their symptoms, even if those symptoms go away, just knowing what the signs are that maybe they need some self-care is really important, because you were mentioning there's times of stress you go through and you notice symptom flaring. I think you and I were talking a couple of weeks ago when we met up for lunch, and I was sharing how I'd gone on a trip and I had a pretty significant tailbone pain when I got back. And the trip was fun, but it was like kind of made sense that I'd be having some pelvic floor irritation or sensitivity after that trip. And in the past, just a couple years ago, I would have been like, what did I do? Did I hit something? Like, did I fall? I don't remember that, but maybe I sat weird. Maybe it was from which I guess sitting could be part of it. But, normally I would be like, did I fall and hit my tailbone? Why does it hurt? And then now, knowing what I know about the pelvic floor, and knowing my own challenges that I've had, I recognize it as, oh, that's probably my pelvic floor is extra tight and I need to be, doing some work to help relax it. So I just think it's really important for women to understand their bodies to the full potential. Obviously, us being healthcare experts makes it a little easier for us to do that. But my goal is always to give women as much useful information that they can apply to their own bodies so they can start to put the pieces together for themselves. And something that I wanted to make sure we talked about, because again, I'm only in the last couple of years getting aware of the whole pelvic health conversation. And for me, a lot of it was really triggered by getting married and going from not having sex to having sex, and that being like, oh, this probably isn't normal. Let's get this looked at. So I think a lot of women are probably like me in the sense that they weren't aware of it because maybe they haven't had a kid yet. And I find that many women think that it's only women who have given birth that they're the ones that are developing pelvic floor dysfunction. Like, after you're pregnant or after you give birth, you get pelvic floor issues. So can you explain why this is a myth and share some of the other factors that might trigger dysfunction outside of pregnancy?
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting, like the pelvic floor is just a group of muscles. So like any other muscles in the body, it can become overstrained, overworked, or because of mobility issues, sometimes we can have difficulty accessing it, right? So pregnancy and birth is a big risk factor, and it's kind of the straw that breaks the camel's back, or the beginning of pelvic problems for many people, because when you get pregnant, the load that you're carrying and your alignment changes a lot. And caring for little kids, a lot of times we don't get into great alignment patterns. And in the modern world, a lot of us have pretty sedentary lifestyles. So we aren't necessarily training movement mechanics that are really conducive to having neutral alignment and everything. So sometimes there's some weakness in the core and the pelvic floor before, but then you add to it like all the additional weight that we put on, because there's baby weight, but then there's all the extra fluid, and like the uterus grows, the placenta weighs, and then our bodies are stretchy to accommodate the growing of a baby. Then that's a lot of times when we realize or we lose connection with the pelvic floor. We have some stretchiness in the core, stretchiness in the pelvic floor, breathing changes, alignment changes, right? But breathing can change and alignment can change, and movement mechanics can be an issue for people that don't have babies. Men have pelvic floor issues. Women have pelvic floor issues. And again, this goes back to movement mechanics for a lot of people. So not having particularly neutral alignment can make it difficult if you are not consistently breathing with your diaphragm, which is the muscle that helps you to bring air into your lungs and push it out. It's also the muscle that stabilizes your spine. It's also in communication with the pelvic floor. They move together up and down like a piston. And so for a lot of people, if you're like a type A personality like me and you deal with stress, you carry tension in your body, you're kind of white knuckling life, right? Then you can get into a pattern where you're not taking deep, full, relaxing breaths, and the diaphragm isn't moving through its full range of motion, and the pelvic floor isn't relaxing down and recruiting all day long every day as it needs to. So it can get lifted and tight. The other thing is if you're in the exercise world and you train abs and you clench your glutes and you radiate a lot of tension in the body to lift heavy or feel strong, then that tension can get to a point where it's just difficult to relax. So like people with really developed abs, a lot of times the abs, your abdominals are connected to the pelvic floor, both actually and then also via forces that happen in the body. And so that over recruitment can just create tension in the pelvic floor, and it's like always tense and it's not really relaxing. So yeah, it doesn't have to be a pregnancy and a birth thing. It can really be a movement mechanics and just like how you do exercise and how you do life, because a lot of people that are going from 0 sitting at a desk to 100 going to CrossFit, and 100 being like very tension creating, inflammation inducing type exercise in the body, they don't really give the pelvic floor an opportunity to kind of like relax and move, because it's either sitting or it's really tense and working and supporting the body.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I know that even the way that we sit and our posture in the seated position can affect the pelvic floor. I mean, I had to totally change the way that I was sitting for my office and get a new chair and everything, because the chair I had was causing me to have this like pelvic tilt where I forget, is it a posterior tilt or your butt kind of like scoops under?
Yeah, if you're tucking it, then it's posterior. And then if it's spilling, the bowl spills to the front, that's anterior.
Okay.
And like a lot of people deal with one or the other.
Yeah. So my chair was 100% the posterior tilt. And I just remember there would be days I'd be working in it and I'd get up and I'm like, oh my gosh, my back really hurts. And like I said, for me, I think a lot of the pelvic floor stuff went totally unnoticed until I got married and then became sexually active and was like, oh, dang, like this is not cool. So it's like, you wouldn't even know if it's happening unless something is kind of triggering those symptoms. And by the time I discovered it, it was like there was a lot of correction that needed to be done and still needs to be done as opposed to prevention. So I'm hoping that we can kind of help with some of the prevention side of things so people that are hearing this episode can get on the ball before, they have to like totally fix a problem that's been developed. Not that fixing the problem it's not like it's hopeless. It's just obviously easier to prevent issues than it is to correct them. And actually that leads me into my next question perfectly. What are some practical steps that women can take to improve their pelvic floor function, no matter what issue that they're currently dealing with?
Yeah. So it's interesting. In a perfect world, everyone would create a movement practice that just kind of fosters whole body health, right? And that includes the pelvic floor. And so I think having a shift in your mindset about exercise can be really helpful because, again, going from sitting all the time to then beating up on your body in the gym can be problematic because when you sit a lot of the day, and a lot of us have to, we work at computers, we're in cars, we're commuting, your body's so smart, it's going to get really efficient at the thing you do the most, right? And then so it's like, it gets really good at sitting. And then we go to the gym and we're like, well, I have to work out for an hour and it has to be really hard in order for it to have value, right? But that's not really something that we practice a lot. We don't have, and also we're leaving out the full range of movement. There's a lot of things that we can do in the middle. Walking, literally moving the pelvis and the pelvic floor in all different directions and planes of motion. So I think that like revisiting your movement practice and knowing that long-term, whether we're talking gut health, mental health, pelvic health, or whatever, having options in movement that are somewhere between sitting on the couch or in the chair or in the car and working really, really hard at the gym is going to be helpful for a lot of different things. It's going to keep your pelvic floor from getting too tense, and it's going to help it to know what it needs to do and remember how to do its job. The other thing that's huge is breathing. And so breathing is always going to be easiest when you're in somewhat neutral alignment. So making sure that your ear is over your shoulders, your ribs are over your pelvis. And you can practice it sitting. Like sitting isn't the worst thing in the world. It's kind of mindless sitting and always sitting the exact same way. Or like you were saying, like persistently sitting with your tailbone tucked, or maybe your pelvis, like a real arch in your back, like a Instagram, like butt model type thing, right? So you want to neutralize that pelvis and make sure your pelvis is under your hips because your diaphragm is pelvis is under your ribs because your diaphragm is in your rib cage and your diaphragm needs to be talking with the pelvic floor, and it's going to work best if it's in communication with what's going on in your throat, like your tongue and your throat, your glottis. And so neutral is good, right? So just getting into the practice of breathing with the diaphragm and knowing that when you inhale, when you take a nice deep inhale through the nose, you get this 360-degree expansion of the ribs. The diaphragm lowers, pelvic floor also relaxes. A lot of people have that reversed, and so that's where they run into problems. So inhale, relax your pelvic floor, exhale. When you exhale, all the air comes out. There's a slight little vacuum recruitment that happens in the core, and the pelvic floor will lift too. So keeping an eye on that and making sure you have lots of options in movement, I think, are two things that I see go a long way with most people.
That's awesome. And I feel like so many of the women that I work with have that all or nothing mindset around exercise. It's either like they have to go 6 days a week really hard or they don't do it at all. And there's so much gray area in between that high intensity every single day type of workout routine versus not doing anything. And so I agree with you. I think variety is so important. And if you're going to do intensity, that it should be like, I don't want to say sporadic, but not every single day, right? Like it should be, you do an intense workout and then you have rest, and then you do an intense workout and you have rest. I mean, personally, I really find that 3 days a week of intense is about as much as my body can handle. And when I go above that, things just get wonky. So, and I know there's women that can handle more than that. And we're not saying people that work out 6 days a week are dumb or anything like that. But I always want to ask people, what's their reasoning for working out like that? And are there any consequences to that type of movement pattern that might be showing up as symptoms? So it's just being aware of how your workout routine can affect more than just your body composition or your weight, how it can affect your stress levels, your levels of inflammation, your pelvic floor function, all of that stuff that is attached to the way that you're training, and recognizing that some of that lower intensity stuff like walking, which I think people half the time don't even consider walking exercise, that stuff's actually really important, and it should be part of the routine. It's not like, oh, walking's not enough calorie burn, so I'm not going to do it. Or, oh, if I go walking, it's got to be this like 3-hour hike or something. It's like just everyday movement like that, I think is so important to build in. And if somebody had to choose between, in my opinion, I'm not a trainer, so you could correct me if I'm wrong, but if I had a client who was choosing between going to going to CrossFit 6 days a week versus going 3 days and then doing some mobility and walking and other more gentle stuff on those other days, I would actually encourage them to do that mixed routine as a even healthier way to approach movement than forcing themselves to go to those high intensity classes every single day.
It's true. And I think a big problem in fitness world is so much of what we do during as exercise is informed by the performance world. So people are expecting themselves to be able to train like the CrossFitters, that's what they get paid to do, right? You know, and they are training really hard, but they also have all day long, every day to recover. They get massage, they have people watching their nutrition. So if you actually took how much time you have in your life for the recovery and also the workout, you kind of like, you know, proportionally did some fraction work and you realize like, I can only do 1/10 of what they do. Then realistically, like if you can only recover 1/10 as much as they can, then you probably should only be training that much. And never discount the fact that like a lot of primal movements like crawling and rolling and things that we did to learn strength, we developed core strength, we developed our ability to move the diaphragm and relax and recruit the pelvic floor. They still have value even as adults. So that other, like you're saying, like walking movement, but even just like rolling around on the ground and crawling. I know for some people like that's way too primal for me. And I was one of those people, but I have seen such a huge improvement in my clients by tapping back into these primal reflexes and primal movements we use as babies to get strong, like, you know, original strength or what animal flow type stuff, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's just so funny because I think so many people will look at that and be like, that's not exercise. Like they don't think it counts because they're not sweating their faces off at the end. And it's so pervasive. I'm not going to use specific names of programming because, you know, I don't dislike the program. I just know that I need to modify it pretty significantly for me to feel good about it. And I've been at a gym recently that the trainer that was running the class was like, hey, who's coming to our burpees day in like, you know, a week or something. It was like on a Saturday. And she's like, we're going to do all these different types of burpees for the full workout. And I was like, literally, that sounds like if somebody wanted to describe hell to me, it would be like do burpees forever. Cause I like basically refuse to do them now. And it's not because I'm lazy or because I can't do them. It's because I find that it causes injury to myself if I do them too often. And I really don't see them as being a very functional movement. So I just personally, I'm like, I don't do burpees. But to me, it's a little sad to know that there's going to be people that go to that class thinking, oh, this is such a great workout. And I hope that they'll be okay afterwards, but maybe they end up injured or something like that. And they're just taught to believe that that's what a good workout is one that makes you exhausted and feels really hard and, you know, potentially even causes injury or extreme soreness afterwards. And something that I've definitely learned over the last 4 or 5 years is that soreness after a workout actually is not necessary to experience benefit from it. So, and it kind of frustrates me because I feel like there's so many programs out there that, and maybe it's client demand or, you know, the societal expectations, but it's like, oh, if you're not sweating and dying at the end, it's because we didn't work you hard enough. And I love training with my personal trainer who, like I went today and I sweat a little bit because I was moving around, but it was like, I could like wear my hair down afterwards and it actually looked okay. So that's always my sign of a good workout. I'm like, I feel like I worked hard and I don't feel like I'm dead, and I can like go through my day and function and not feel like, oh my gosh, I'm like totally done for the day. So anyway, that's just a little bit of a soapbox side note, but I know the way that you train people is definitely a way that I appreciate and would love for more people to experience, which is awesome because you're an online trainer, so more people can experience that. Now, I wanted to, well, first of all, I don't want to like just totally go in another direction without any sort of like closure to the pelvic health piece, because like I said, I know that that's a big area of your expertise. Is there anything that you feel like, I want to say like the Christian women population, since again, I think my platform is one that is bringing them into the conversation about health issues that I think a lot of times they're missing. Is there anything that you would tell someone who's a Christian woman that all of this is new to them? Like what advice do you have for them to learn more about pelvic health and to start working on getting their pelvic floor function optimized?
I would probably say that it's really important for us all to understand that we are individuals and we're created in God's image, and God is not male or female, right? Like we're just as much created in his image, and he created sex and he created bodies. And when there is something wrong with your body and that it is painful and an uncomfortable thing, you need to take action. And sometimes action for a lot of people is just noticing and acknowledging it and not thinking that, you can just put it off and it will go away, or it's not that important, or that it's fine, right? Like I tell a lot of women, like pelvic floor issues are a red flag. Like they're an indicator that there's something wrong. And what is just painful sex today could be a much bigger problem later. Like, over-recruited pelvic floors, which a lot of women deal with, cause constipation. Constipation means that toxins and old, nasty hormones are getting reabsorbed into your bloodstream and negatively impacting your whole system. So like sometimes pain and discomfort, it can be difficult to deal with. We don't have a lot of time. A lot of women are they're serving their family. They think of themselves as a servant, but part of your job is also to advocate for yourself and take care of yourself, both because you're important. You're created in God's image. Like he didn't make a mistake. He didn't create you just to be a doormat. And then also like long-term, your health is going to be better and you're going to be able to do all the important things you feel passionately about if you make a concerted effort. And it doesn't always have to be a lot of time. There's a lot of ways. I work with a lot of Christian women that are overwhelmed. They got a lot of kids, they're homeschooling, they're doing all sorts of things, they're working at church. And we come up with very simple, I created an entire course that's like, this is what you need to do each day, just a small little thing, right? So that they can start to get proactive. And also want to remind women, like husbands, good husbands, like they want you to enjoy sex too. They want you to be confident and feel good in your body too. Mm-hmm. So sometimes it's not always talked about, every relationship is different. Every partnership is different, but like generally people that love you, like they want you to feel good and healthy and they want you to advocate for yourself, right? Mm-hmm. You would want your husband, if his prostate was hurting himself, to do something about it and speak up and not just like white knuckle sex, right? Like it's the same thing for you.
Yeah. And I feel like that's probably one of the main topics around pelvic floor dysfunction that Christian women would really shy away from, because talking about sex is like, oh my gosh, it's so like uncomfortable. And I think, the sad part is, and like I said, I wasn't raised Christian, so I kind of escaped this a little bit, but I think, and this isn't necessarily just Christian women either, there's so many women out there that look at sex as being like, that's for my husband. Like that's for him to enjoy himself. Like when I'm having sex with my husband, it's like I'm serving him and like, and listen, there's nothing wrong with trying to make sure your partner is having a good time too. I'm not bashing that, but I do think a lot of women look at sex as being like, well, it doesn't matter if it hurts because it's not it's not for me anyway. So I just have to, like you said, white knuckle or grin and bear it and just deal with it. Or what happens is it is uncomfortable and it's not something you're like itching to do. And if you're not in a relationship with a man who's like very demanding about it, it can turn into a situation where you're not having sex at all because you're like, well, it doesn't even feel good. So why do I even want to do it? And then your husband's like, well, I don't want her to feel bad, so I'm just going to kind of like not touch her because I don't want to like hurt her. And then that becomes, that's not the best relationship that we can experience either. And I, just to give a little plug, I have a colleague, I can't remember if I mentioned her to you, Jackie Dixon, who does a whole program for Christian women on enjoying sex. It's actually called the Orgasm Class. So it's very clear what the purpose of the class is. But I just love how she explains how our bodies were created. And there's like literally parts of our bodies that are only there to help us enjoy sex. Like there's literally no other function that we know of to those parts of our bodies. So it's like, if that's the way we were created, then obviously we are created to have a great time with our partners, our spouses, when we're having sex. And to just ignore that, again, we're not saying like your life is over if that's the case, but I do think that's a big part of our relationship with our spouses and just feeling feminine and feeling like confident in our bodies. I feel like if that's not working well, then it does ripple out to other areas of our lives, and it will affect how we carry ourselves and how we feel about ourselves, even if it has nothing to do with how we look. So,
right. It's really important, and intimacy is an important part of marriage. So it suffers. The other thing is it's great for the nervous system. So
yes, lots of good things about sex. I should definitely have Jackie on to do a podcast, because I'm like, she'll just blow everybody's mind with what she talks about. I'm just like, whoa, okay, cool. I'll save it for maybe another episode if we want to get a little bit more into that direction. But this is kind of a good transition for some of the other questions I wanted to ask you about, because like I said, other than just being super knowledgeable about the science and the practicalities of pelvic floor dysfunction and strength and conditioning and how to move in a way that's going to maximize our health in general, you do have a really strong faith as being something that infuses into not only your work, but I would say probably your whole life is fairly defined by that belief system. So I would just love to hear from you. How would you say that your faith plays into the work that you do in the fitness and pelvic health world?
Yeah, it's so funny. It's something I ask myself like almost every day. I've actually been praying a lot about it, because I think it's so easy in the secular world to look. There's a lot of people that are doing amazing things in business and fitness, and I want to learn from them because they have good skills. But then I'm always like, okay, but how does this align with what you have for me, God? Like, what am I doing, right? I always just keep coming back to the concept of servanthood, right? And so I just want to serve women in the way that they need. And so whenever I'm kind of struggling to think like, why am I doing this? Or what should I do next? I generally turn to my community. I'm like, what do you need? Like, how can I serve you better? And so I think like in fitness, like women need to know that it's totally okay to want to be confident in their bodies. They want their outside to a certain extent to reflect how they feel on the inside, or make them feel confident. And I think being distracted and being dissatisfied by how we look and feel in our bodies can become an idol. It can become a distractor. It can keep us from doing the work that God has for us. A lot of the things that we can do, for the world, serving others, requires us to be physically capable, right, in movement. And so I really just try to walk this line of helping women get themselves to their goals for their body in an efficient manner, so that they don't have to like have their whole lives obsessed about exercise or their bodies, but then also encourage them to understand that at the end of the day, how you pursue your goal and the character that you develop in that pursuit is really what's going to matter, because who you are is most important, And so, and that can extend to anything, your exercise practice, or even like how you feel about your pelvic floor, and confidence in your body. So I think it's a really weird role that I'm playing right now. And I don't always know what it's supposed to look like, but at the end of the day, I look at the circumstances God has handed me and the difficulties, because I've had major pelvic floor issues personally, and setbacks in fitness and injuries. And I'm always thinking like, how can you use this? And how can I allow this setback to grow my faith in you? And remember, well, you say like, I'm more than a body, right? I'm not just my body. So I don't want my physical being to detract from my life, but I also don't want it to define my life. And I want other women to have that freedom too. And pelvic floor problems can really be a huge detractor. So I guess that would be my synopsis.
Well, I love that. And I know you and I have talked before about fitness goals and even like weight loss goals, and how there's such a black and white philosophy about a lot of the stuff. It's either, that do or die, like you gotta like be super disciplined and no cheat days and like all that kind of mindset around nutrition and fitness and health and all that. And there's a lot of shame that's circulating in that environment where people are like, fat shaming, or, they say if you're not sticking to your goals, then you're just lazy. Like there's definitely a super extreme piece there. And then if we go to the other side of the spectrum, I always hesitate to say this because people get super defensive. And usually it's because they're not these people. So when I talk about things like the health at every size and body positivity movement, I'm not saying that that movement as a whole is problematic, but I've seen some extreme ends of that movement where people say you should, if anyone tells you to count macros, that's disordered, or, any professional that is helping you lose weight is unethical and weight loss is never successful. And I look at that stuff and I'm like, that's like legitimately not scientifically accurate to say that nobody is able to successfully lose weight and to try to do that is unethical. I'm like, that just doesn't make any sense to me. I know that a lot of the ways that people try to lose weight are ineffective and harmful and, mentally and spiritually harmful as well as physically harmful. And a lot of times 99% of those people that are dieting are driven by shame, which makes them kind of bounce in between. I'm doing the things and then I feel shame and I screw up and then I'm like, I give up because I feel shame. And it's just this like shame spiral. And I hate the fact that it's like, those are our options. It's like, you're either like obsessed with your body and doing all the things to take care of it and like being super neurotic about your diet and your exercise habits and like never giving yourself a break, or you have no discipline and, weight loss is not even something you even try to work on if you potentially need to. And, any sort of like numerical evaluation of your diet or exercise habits is disordered. I really do not like the fact that those are the options that are presented. And I love that you and I are on the same page where it's like, hey, we don't want any of your health habits to be driven by shame about your body or feeling like you're not good enough as the person you were created to be. And we don't want you to just say, well, because I don't feel shame, I'm just going to like eat donuts for every meal and like lay on the couch all day, because, not to say that if you want to do that, fine, like go ahead, you're allowed to do that. But is that really the best life that God created you for? And is that, are you going to be able to pursue the work or the relationships or, the passions that you are called to pursue if you're dealing with health problems that are developing because of those habits? So I feel like, it's a fine line and everybody's on a different place of that spectrum, but I don't see anything wrong with doing activities and monitoring your diet in a way that is observatory and, more of like a, hey, what's going to work best for me? Let me try some stuff, and not putting all this emotional baggage around it and having that diet mentality. So I love being able to chat with someone who's on that same page because, like I said, I get the impression that most of the health world is kind of split pretty hard in those other directions. And it just frustrates me because, like I said, the people that say it's unethical to help a client lose weight, I'm like, that seems really accurate to me, but what do I know, right?
It's interesting because sometimes people need help losing weight because they're actually dieting and they are exercising and they're doing things in a way that's causing them to gain weight, like overtraining and eating foods that don't really, that are not, I guess, consistent with their goals and all that. So sometimes people are doing harmful things that are leading, or oftentimes people are doing harmful things that are leading to them gaining weight. Yeah, I see a lot of people like apologizing, like, or feeling bad or guilty or ashamed of even coming out and saying like, I can help you. But here's the thing, like, I'm a balanced person in fitness that I don't think aesthetics should always be front and foremost. And I think the path you take to get to your goal, if it's harmful to you and it's not good for your body and your well-being, then that's not a good thing. It's not going to serve you long term. I want people to find me and other women like me with that mindset, and not, if we don't have that, then they're going to just only go to the toxic people that are like, go on this grapefruit diet, drink celery juice, and, go to the gym 5 days a week or whatever, so I don't know, goals, and everyone's individual. And it's really helpful, I think, in this respect, and you to work one-on-one or get in a really cool program with professionals that know what they're talking about. They have experience, they have science, they've worked with a lot of clients, and they can help you find a really balanced, nourishing way forward, like Fed and Fearless.
Well, and like I said, I think everybody's going to be on a different journey. And my perspective is always that weight loss or fat loss should not be the only thing that you're tracking when it comes to your health. And as long as you have a clear picture of the rest of your body and you know what to watch for, and you know signs and symptoms of dysfunction in different areas like your gut health, your hormones, your stress levels, your sleep, all of that, if you can monitor those and make some adjustments to your diet and exercise routine that have evidence to support that they may help you shed body fat, then it's, in my mind, I'm like, what's the problem? It's when the pursuit of fat loss becomes the only thing that matters, and women are only looking at the scale as being an indicator of whether or not they're on the right track, and they're completely shutting off how their pelvic floor feels, how their gut is doing, like if they're menstruating or not, if they have terrible PMS, like all of those things that, in my mind, make a bigger impact on quality of life than the number on the scale. As long as those are being managed well and you feel good and you want to try losing weight, it's okay. And I think it's, I don't think I need to give people permission, but I just kind of want to let people know that there are people like myself and Sarah out there who are helping people work towards fitness goals in a way that does not require you to just like ignore your health.
Yeah. I mean, we're not going to be this age long-term forever either. That's the other thing. I think there's a real youthful mentality in the fitness world where we can just work really hard, and we're not necessarily trying to cultivate long-term habits to serve us well and make us feel good as we age. And a lot of my clients that come to me with pelvic floor issues, it is because contributed to by their overtraining and their relationship with exercise, so that can be the wake up call for a lot of women, and just realize like, I'm creating a lot of tension and a lot of inflammation in my body, and I'm not really moving so much as just trying to exercise my body into a certain shape. And it's harming me, and it's making me less confident, because like, it's hard to be really confident in your body when you're peeing your pants, it's just not. And so I feel like I'm like, well, 6-pack abs or like really strong, confident, capable body. What's more important to you right now? Can we pivot a little bit and see that there's a whole broad spectrum of health and movement that we can pay attention to outside of just like exercise for calories and thinness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I forget. Oh, where was I? Oh, I was at another, again, I'll leave it unnamed. I was at another training place when I was on a trip recently, just because it was available. And I was like, let me try this. And one of the videos that I was doing with one of the pieces of equipment was this guy, and he kept saying, oh, we're going to get you guys burnt, like earn the burn and blah, blah. And we're going to burn like 500 calories in this workout. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, the workout's like 10 minutes long. That's literally not possible. I don't know what this guy's talking about. I'm like, maybe I burned 100 calories. And why is it like I have to earn the burn? What does that even mean? So it's just like, that's the kind of stuff that's so stupid. And I'm like, I don't usually use the word stupid that often, but that is literally stupid to say you're going to burn 500 calories in 10 minutes. So I see that kind of stuff. And sometimes I forget, because I've been going to a gym that's so much more intelligently designed as far as the programming is concerned. And we don't talk about how many calories we're burning, or like, are we earning our meal later or something stupid like that. And I'm just like, whenever I hear it, it's almost like I'm like, oh my God, I forgot this exists. Like I forgot that this is a real thing. So sometimes I was just going to say, it's probably good that I get exposed to that kind of stuff, because I'm like, oh yeah, this is what my clients are dealing with. So
I know. I just go on Pinterest sometimes and I see like popular pins, and I'm like, whoa,
how to get rid of the bat wings or whatever.
I know, right? And I'm like, I forget that there's a world out there, because I don't really surround myself with it. But it's good, because it gives me information about what I need to combat, and helps me understand where people are coming from, because they don't know. If they're being told this, I mean, that guy's an expert, right, on the machine telling you what to do. He's a trainer. It's too bad. And, with Instagram and everything, like we think we get the whole picture, but we see snapshots of people and people that are in incredibly good shape, but we don't know what else they're dealing with. A lot of the people that come to work with me, they're in great shape. They're in great shape and they have pelvic floor dysfunction, so we don't know. We don't always have the whole picture. So we really need to, like you were saying earlier, like we have to understand our bodies. We don't have to get like PhDs in anatomy and physiology or neuroscience or whatever, but we have to have a fundamental understanding, especially as women, physiologically, about how like our menstrual cycle, our hormones, our skin, our gut responds to all these choices we're making. So we can make informed decisions and we can notice the red flags, because there are people in the fitness world, they're not even paying attention to their own red flags. They don't even know they're leading you astray, because they're about to hit crisis mode too, but they don't know.
Yeah, it's kind of scary. I've had people reach out to me before who are in the health and fitness world and have like pretty big followings, and they're reaching out to me because they're not getting their period and they're like, I need help. And not surprising, most of them don't end up joining my program because I think they think I know all this stuff, but I'm just like, it does scare me a little bit to see, especially in the women's health world, that there are these quote unquote experts that are ignoring a pretty serious sign of dysfunction in their own bodies because, looking good for Instagram is more important than having a regular menstrual cycle. So, and that's not to be judgmental. It's more just kind of like, that's the state of the online health and fitness world, that people, it's really easy to create an image. And if you're comparing yourself to that image and you think, well, they're doing X, Y, Z and they're perfectly healthy. It's like, are they though? Are you sure about that? And so I think just kind of coming back to yourself and saying, what is the signs that I am paying attention to? Like you mentioned skin health, when my skin starts to break out, okay, maybe I need to like reassess my diet or my stress levels or my, my sleep. Or if I have really bad PMS, or if I'm having a lot of anxiety when I'm ovulating, like those are for me signs that I'm like, okay, I need to start paying attention because something's off. So just knowing what your body's telling you and at least knowing whether it's like you're normal or if it's not normal for you. And even normal, like having anxiety around ovulation, I know is not normal. And I can tell, like, for me, it's been triggered by the move that I just went through and trying to do too many things in my business at the same time. And so I'm recognizing, I'm like, okay, I know that this is a sign of stress, but it's not something that I want to just let happen all the time. Whereas I think a lot of women are like, oh, I just always have really bad PMS, or I always am, dealing with bloating. And it's just starting to pay attention to those symptoms and think to yourself, like, first of all, is this the way I want to live the rest of my life? If not, like, let's start to figure out what might be going on. And once you start seeing patterns, then, doing what you need to do to create space or create boundaries that allow you to protect your health from the different things that might trigger those symptoms. So again, it's more of a self-knowledge approach and not comparing yourself to what other people are doing. Because like you said, I mean, most of these super fit, like CrossFit athletes or marathon runners, that kind of thing, they construct their whole life around their training routine because they have to be able to train at that level. And most of us can't do that or don't want to do that. So don't try to train like them.
Yeah. And it's okay if your body doesn't always look like it's in peak performance state either. Cause that was, for me, there was a period of time where I thought healthy meant really super lean and cut. And so if I wasn't super lean and I caught things in the mirror, I thought, oh, I'm getting less healthy. But that wasn't true. But it took exposure to good information and surrounding myself with people on social media and books and all sorts of stuff to help me like reframe like what it means for me to be feeling good,
Mm-hmm. Well, I could probably talk to you, and I have talked to you in the past for a long time, hours. So I will be mindful of our time. And I have two more questions for you. One is, what is your big vision for the work that you're doing and the impact that you hope to have on the world?
Yeah. So my big vision is to get as many opportunities as I can to get in front of groups of women and increase awareness and help them know that there's strategies and solutions that they can start today. And I want it to be at a point where like pelvic floor struggles are something that when people deal with it, they don't freak out and they know they can go online and they can get information and strategies and they're not alone. And there's other people working in this field that are doing that. I think my big emphasis is really on considering how the pelvic floor is connected to so many different things. So lifestyle, other parts of the body, your internal, external environment. I like to zoom out from problems. It's sort of my agricultural systems thinking, like primal way of doing things, where we're like, okay, this is one piece of the puzzle, but what else is connected to? So I would really like to also just kind of shift how people think about the pelvic floor and understand that just like skin and gut health and hormones, it can be an indicator that there's other things in the system that are not optimally functioning right now.
Awesome. And I have one more question for you that I did not prepare you for, but you kind of already answered it, but I'll let you do another round, see if it changes at all. What do you believe makes a person more than a body?
Oh, yeah. So I think what makes us more than a body is that all of us are put on this earth, created in God's image, and our job is to worship Him. And we can do that in so many different ways because we all are given different talents and abilities. And there's a whole story in the Bible about burying the talents, and the guy that buries them gets chastised. Like, what did you do with that? And so being more than a body, bodies are important because they help us to do all the important work that we need to do. But at the end of the day, who we are and how we serve others and how we make the most of the, good and bad that happens to us in our life, I think is what's most important, because we do die and we don't bring our body with us, right? And character is so important. And so I think that doing fitness and physical health and all this stuff in a manner that builds character is really, really important for everybody.
I love that answer. And this is why we're friends, because I was like, praise hands, love it. So, well, anyway, Sarah, like I said, I could probably talk to you for another 3 hours and it would feel like 5 minutes. So I will respect our listeners' time and your time, because I know you're a busy woman. The last thing I would love to know is, how can our audience connect with you and get to know more about the work that you do?
Yeah. So everything I have is Sarah Smith Strength. My website, sarahsmithstrength.com, my handles on social media. I'm very active on Instagram. So you direct message me, hey, this is what's going on in my pelvic floor. I'm going to answer you and help you find solutions. And then I also have a really cool course, speaking of connecting, called Connect Your Core and Pelvic Floor. So anybody that wants to kind of level up and get some answers and information on how to move and breathe and live in a manner that supports their core and their pelvic floor can check that out. You can find that on Instagram.
Yeah. I've heard lots of great things about that course, and all of Sarah's stuff is so affordable. I wish she would charge more, because I think her information and her teaching is so valuable, but maybe I'll talk her into, valuing her services higher in the future. But if you're hearing this now, maybe you can get it at the current price, which I think is way, way like a no-brainer investment for the knowledge and the empowerment that you're going to get from working with Sarah. So,
well, thank you.
Move fast.
Before Laura gets to me.
Yeah. Before I'm like, why do you not charge more for this amazing service that you provide? So, and before I tell her to like shut her DMs down and not be like coaching people in the DMs, I'm like, you've worked way too hard for all your knowledge to just be like on DMs all day. But that's, like I said, she's totally service oriented and just out there to help people. So I know that if you work with her or work through one of her programs, you're going to get amazing results and just a really caring person to work through these challenges with. So all of that said, thank you so much, Sarah. I loved having you on, and I know we'll definitely have you on in the future to get more amazing insight from you. And definitely go check out Sarah's program, the Connect Your Core and Pelvic Floor. And until next time, we will see you on the next episode of the Fed and Fearless podcast. Bye, everyone. Hey, everybody. Laura Schoenfeld here again. I just wanted to pop back in and let you know that we still have an opportunity to participate in my brand new free 5-day Christian body confidence challenge called Faith Over Fear. The truth is, health is simply a tool to pursue your purpose. And I know beyond a shadow of a doubt that you were created for so much more than fear and frustration around food and fitness. And deep down, you want to believe it when God says that you are awesomely and wonderfully made. And I'd love to show you how you can experience true freedom in your health and incredible purpose for your life. I want you to find a brand new perspective on how to approach health from a faith-based perspective, so you can live the purpose-driven life that you were created for. And that's exactly what you'll learn in this new 5-day body confidence challenge. In this free challenge, you'll learn how to replace negative self-talk with healthy spiritual truths so you can honor God with the way that you care for your body. Go to fedandfearless.com/challenge to register. Technically, we've already started, but if you jump in before the end of this week, you can still access the challenge and participate. So go to fedandfearless.com/challenge, and I will see you there.